Here's a poem that I can't figure out whether it's so sanguine that it's gloomy or so gloomy that it's sanguine. Either way, it is one of Shakespeare's sonnets, and so you have to read it. Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in 3 separate playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being the poetry discussion playlist, now approaching 700 videos strong. Number 2 being the William Shakespeare's Sonnets playlist, a playlist of videos dedicated to William Shakespeare's sonnets, and number 3 being 30 must-read poems. Each of the 30 must-read poems videos has 3 sections to it. Number 1 being a brief biography of the writer in question. Number 2 being a brief recap of what the writer in question typically writes. And number 3 being an analysis of the poem itself. And so, who was William Shakespeare? William Giuseppe Shakespeare was born April 23, 1564, in Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, England. I have to admit, the English certainly do name their places much more elegantly than we do here in the United States. For example, Shakespeare is from Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, and I am from Kansas City, Missouri. Though I'll definitely take American food over theirs. Also, yes, I did make up a middle name because Shakespeare did not have one. Sue me. For reference, 1564 was the same year Galileo Galilei was born. It was the first time anyone documented a sighting of a rat king, and it was the year the Italian artist and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Michelangelo died. William's father, John, was a glover. No, not that Glover, a glove-making glover. He was also well-regarded enough to serve as an alderman, a type of city councilman. Though, for reasons unknown to us, all that changed in the late 1570s. John lost his position as an alderman, and some illegal wool purchases cost his business as well, spiraling the family into harder conditions. Unfortunate indeed, but who is to say how much of the young playwright's sense of justice and tragedy were rooted here? And, perhaps, his propensity for writing royalty came from his mother, Mary Arden, themselves gentry, whose lineage is traceable all the way back to the Norman invasion of 1066. November 27, 1582, at 18 years old, William Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. No, not that Anne Hathaway, though I kinda like it. Historians often say things like, there may have been haste in this arrangement, haste in this marriage, because the marriage banns were only read once as opposed to the customary 3 times. How strange. There may have been haste to this marriage. Anne Hathaway gave birth to their first child, Susanna, 6 months later. I'll let you do the math on that. February of 1585, the Shakespeares had twins, Hamnet and Judith. Then Shakespeare, like Jesus, disappears from history for a few years, until he pops up in London in 1592, where he began playing Quidditch for Ravenclaw. Obviously, that's a joke. He was producing his plays on the big stage of London, and his education, or lack thereof, was getting him sneered at by the fancy quote-unquote university wits, as they have come to be known, like Christopher Marlowe, with Marlowe's fellow college boy, Robert Greene, not that one, saying, quote, "There is an upstart crow beautified with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide, supposes he is as well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you, and being an absolute Johannes factotum, is in his own conceit the only shake scene in a country. With this quote, Green had mocked Shakespeare on several levels, and even mocks a line from Shakespeare's Henry VI, where the tiger's heart is wrapped around a woman's hide. But by the time of that quote, Shakespeare's name was made, even if his reputation was not yet made as the greatest author of all time. A few years later, his son Hamnet would die of unknown causes, and it seems something snapped in William Shakespeare, as his most acclaimed works, including the ominously titled Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, Much Ado About Nothing, Measure for Measure, Midsummer Night's Dream, The Merchant of Venice, Othello, maybe Romeo and Juliet, as well as the form and genre-destroying portfolio of 154 sonnets, all followed that date. Despite the fact that William Shakespeare was already 32 years old when his son passed. All told, his works are believed to total between 37 and 39 plays, depending on where you're getting your facts, the aforementioned 154 sonnets, 2 long narrative poems, and myriad less famous poems. Not to mention, he's believed to have invented or introduced 1,700-ish new words, including such bangers as bedroom, majestic, lonely, undress, critic, addiction, and Jessica. And how many words did Robert Greene coin? With his fancy pedigree from academe. Ooh, academe, that's another one. That one probably belongs to Shakespeare as well as the fact that Shakespeare was part owner in the Globe Theatre. In 1613, Shakespeare seems to have retired, though he may not have conceptualized it as such. Not long thereafter, he had a night out with the boys, those boys being Michael Drayton, a poet, and Ben Jonson, a poet and playwright in his own right. It is conjectured that that night went well, possibly too well, because Shakespeare caught a fever and died the next day, April 23rd, the day he's believed to have been born. But, 52 years later. In his will, he famously left his wife, Anne Hathaway, his second best bed. One must wonder if this is Shakespeare's notorious wit and cunning deployment of innuendo at work. The epitaph on his grave reads, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." So what kind of poems did Shakespeare write? Well, 154 of them were sonnets. What is a sonnet? The sonnet is a popular classical form that has compelled poets for centuries. Traditionally, the sonnet is a 14-line poem written in iambic pentameter, employing one of several rhyme schemes and adhering to a tightly structured thematic organization. The name is taken from the Italian sonetto, or sonetto, which means a little sound or song. But Shakespeare didn't write just any kind of sonnet. He wrote what is now known as a Shakespearean sonnet. Well, what's a Shakespearean sonnet? A variation on the Italian sonnet tradition. The form evolved in England during and around the time of the Elizabethan era. These sonnets are sometimes referred to as Elizabethan sonnets or English sonnets. Although Shakespeare's sonnets have prominently endured for centuries, he was hardly alone in his embrace of this poetic style. Many prominent English poets of the day, from John Donne to John Milton, also wrote sonnets. Shakespearean sonnets feature the following elements. They are 14 lines long. The 14 lines are divided into 4 subgroups. The first 3 subgroups have 4 lines each, which makes them quatrains, with the second and fourth lines of each group containing rhyming words. The sonnet then concludes with a 2-line subgroup, and these 2 lines rhyme with each other. A B, C D, E F, G, G. That is the rhyme scheme. They are typically 10 syllables per line, which are phrased in iambic pentameter. When, in disgrace with fortune and in men's eyes, I, all alone, beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. So we get this speaker in just a terrible spot here. I'm going to pull the old trick and break this into quatrains and then a final couplet. So we have that quatrain, we have that quatrain, we have this quatrain. All right, now we're ready to go. The first 4 lines, the first quatrain of this poem. When, in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. We are in the dumps here. This is just self-loathing. There is nothing appreciable happening. Disgrace in fortune and in men's eyes. We are someone who is just deplorable here, not even able to find any relinquishment in our own self. We are alone and miserable for it. So that's where we start the poem, right? That's the first quatrain there. The second quatrain here, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Here, we're getting into jealousy. I want this man's ability to create art or collect art. Maybe there's no real distinction there. I want this guy's ability to do this. I want that guy's riches and wealth. So here we find ourselves going from just being miserable to understanding that part of our misery is the fact that we want what other people have. Hello, Instagram, right? That's where we are as a society right now, trying to make other people want the stuff we have because we want the stuff that other people have. And then in this third quatrain down here, yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. So, when I'm feeling this bad, when I am down, I think about you, I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day rising, from sullen earth, when I think of you, I sing hymns at heaven's gate. That third quatrain, we find hope, or at least we find a reason. In that third quatrain, we have the beloved, and that is why our speaker decides to keep on going. He goes from miserable to realizing why he's miserable because he wants everything those other people have. But then he realizes, I realize what I have, and that is my baby, right? And then we get this final couplet here. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Because when I remember I do have you, I'm richer than the king. I would not trade what I have for what the king has for a single moment. Now, this is a journey of a poem. Just again, real quick. Up here, stanza 1. Everything sucks and I don't care anymore. Stanza 2. Everything sucks worse than the guy next to me, and that's why I know everything sucks. Because it's worse than his, and I want his, because it doesn't suck as much. Stanza 3. Yeah, things suck. But I do have one thing, and that's you. And I love you. And then the final couplet. And because I have you, I have more than anybody. So not only does not anything suck anymore, but I don't want any of the not suck life that other people have. And they want mine, but they can't have it. What a circuitous event here of a poem. Now, it reminds me of a quote from Nietzsche, as all things can if you do them wrong. In Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche said something to the effect of, and I'm not going to get it exactly right because it's German, and German sucks to translate anyway, and no one can ever tell you exactly what something in German means. I'm salty right now. I've slept 10 hours of the last 85 hours. But anyway, if I know my why, I can endure any how. If I know my why do I do it? If I know why I do it, I can endure almost any how. The beloved here is the why. And maybe our speaker's life does not magically change during the course of this poem. Maybe, instead, our speaker's life does still suck. Maybe our speaker is still at a disadvantage to all of his neighbors and wants all of their stuff. But when he thinks of his beloved, none of it matters and he can ignore it. He can trudge through everything that he has and does not have. He can exist through any trial and tribulation because he has his beloved. There's a lot of types of poetry, right? Sometimes the metaphor is the important part. The metaphor is the literary part, right? Most of the time, I think that's true. Other times, I think that there is just wisdom in these words. And here, I think we have that type of poem. It seems, important to have family, a loved one, or a mission. At least one of those three things. Have family, have a lover, or a mission. One of those three things. And it's easier to tie your shoes in the morning. And if you don't have any of them, I think you got to try to find one, man. I think you have to try to find one. In that way, this poem is not a love poem as much as it is a thank you. Our speaker is telling the beloved, look, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't tie my shoes in the morning. I would be full of jealousy and rage. I would be mopey all the time. I would be a wretch to society if I did not have you. If there is a metaphor to be found here, who is the thee in question? Does it have to be a person? Can it be a mission? Can it be my work gives me meaning in life? The same way that does having children, the same way that does having a spouse, the same way that does taking care of my parents, whatever it is. Can it be a mission? I think that is an important question. I think the answer is yes. But I'd better think the answer is yes. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.